You know, when you're learning Spanish as an adult, one of your goals is, well, I would assume, is to be conversational in Spanish. And that can be difficult to do because of the speed of, you're taking your language and you're learning this other language. And I know everybody's like, oh, just think in the new language, Paul. Yeah, well, that takes some time. So in the meantime, it's a good idea to develop certain techniques that will allow you to translate faster, so you can keep up with conversations in real time and avoid those really awkward pauses when somebody asks you something. ¿Qué hiciste ayer? What'd you do yesterday? No, you don't want to have to do that. So there's different techniques that I talk about in my videos. One of them is to learn the Spanish language in little chunks, patterns, little plug-and-play phrases that you can pop together to slow the conversation down. And it's particularly useful to learn sentence starters. So when that person asks you a question, ¿Qué piensas de lo que pasó ayer? What do you think about the thing that happened yesterday? Bueno, bueno's a great one. Bueno, en cuanto a lo que pasó ayer. Also a great sentence starter, in reference to or regarding, giving me a lot of time to think. Now, another method to, being able to do this more quickly is to avoid having to conjugate the verb whenever possible. And they may be like, Paul, I don't think we can get around conjugating verbs. Not always, but there are certain circumstances where you can create sentences where you're just popping in infinitives, which are the unconjugated verb, and that's taking that extra fraction of a second to think what that conjugation might be. Take a look at this sentence. When I arrived home, I went to bed. This has two verbs that need to be conjugated, right? If we just translated this right into Spanish, we would have to conjugate them both. We'd get something like, Cuando llegué a casa, me acosté. But there is a way we can avoid translating that first verb, and it's with this, al, A-L, which is actually the preposition a, and then the definite article el put together. You've seen this, I'm sure. They get together and form al. You've probably seen it in sentences like, fui al parque, right? They got together. Well, this is a slightly different usage. So we're going to take al and then put an infinitive after it. And it's going to mean upon doing something. So if we plug it into our sentence, we're going to change it to al llegar a casa, upon arriving home. Now that second clause we still have to conjugate. We can't get around it completely, right? Al llegar a casa, me acosté. But it is less to think about. When I finished the report, I sent it to my boss. We can do it the long way, right? Cuando terminé el informe, se lo envié a mi jefe. But can't we just say, upon finishing the report, I sent it to my boss? Yes. Go ahead and do that. Do that. Gotta get some coffee. Are you ready? Al terminar el informe. Did you get that? And the rest didn't change, right? Se lo envié a mi jefe. Now, some folks watching may have keyed in on the fact that in English, I'm saying upon finishing the report and upon arriving home. And you may have been taught that when you have that in English, in Spanish, we're using those ando y endo endings. Arriving would be llegando. Finishing would be terminando. So does that sound familiar? Were you thinking this should be like al llegando or something? No. Think of it this way. When we have our prepositions and our prepositional phrases in Spanish, we just pop in infinitives, the unconjugated verb. That's it. Doesn't that make it easier? I think it does. I think these are fantastic sentence starters for those types of sentences. Like if I want to say, when Maria received the bad news, she got sad, I can change that first part to, upon receiving the bad news, a recibir las malas noticias. And instead of saying something like, when I saw my friend, I waved at him, I could say, upon seeing my friend, al ver a mi amigo. Now, if you want to stop the video now because you got enough out of it and you just want to play with that all day, go ahead. But if you want to stick around, I'm going to show you some more prepositional phrases. Just plug infinitives in, all right, after a sip of coffee. The next one on our list is going to be antes de plus infinitive, before doing something. Before arriving home, I went to the store to buy bread. Antes de llegar a casa, fui a la tienda a comprar pan. Before arriving. See, in English we're saying arriving, but we know in Spanish we only put infinitives after these prepositions and prepositional phrases. So that's not throwing us off anymore, right? Now I just want to talk about how to use these with pronominal verbs. That's where you have your reflexive pronoun attached. If I want to say something like, before going to bed, I watched a movie. And I'm going to use acostarse. I'm going to attach that acostarse, and the only thing I have to pay attention to is the reflexive pronoun. That's who's going to bed? I am. So it's going to be antes de acostarme. See? Me. If I'm going to say before you went to bed, it would be antes de acostarte. Before we went to bed, antes de acostarnos. Next one on our list is después de, after. I know you had before, you're already thinking after, right? Works the same way. After watching the movie, I went to bed. I think you can do that one. Go ahead and do that one. And the coffee here. You ready? Después de ver la película, me acosté. Just plug in infinitives. Next one on our list is en vez de plus infinitive, which means instead of doing something. Instead of working, I decided to rest for a while. En vez de trabajar, decidí descansar un rato. So just plug in anything. En vez de estudiar, instead of studying. En vez de ir a la playa, instead of going to the beach. Now another alternative for that is en lugar de. You can use that for instead of. It literally means in place of. En lugar de estudiar en la biblioteca, instead of studying at the library, blah, 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 whatever you want to say. Next one on our list is just a single word, sin, and it means without. She left without saying goodbye. Ella se fue sin despedirse. And see, despedirse is a pronominal verb, so it's going to have to agree, and it does here, because it's third person, right? She. If I left, me fui sin despedirme. Me fui sin despedirme. Just make sure that reflexive pronoun agrees. I ate the pizza without heating it. You want to try that one? Comí la pizza sin calentarla. Sin calentarla. We're just plugging that in. And the la is a direct object pronoun referring to the pizza. Now I'm going to give you one more today. I could give you more, but I just don't want you to get overwhelmed and it just becomes noise. I'm going to end on a really strong one though. Para, in order to. This one is fantastic. You should definitely have this in your Spanish toolbox. I bought flowers to decorate the house. And although in English I'm not saying in order to decorate the house, I could, right? That means para is going to fit in there. Compré flores para decorar la casa. We left the house early to arrive on time. In order to arrive on time. Salimos de la casa temprano para llegar a tiempo. You've got this, right? Now, I just have to point this out. Para can be more complicated. It's simple if we don't have a subject change in our clauses. We left early in order to arrive on time. Who's arriving on time? We are. We're just talking about ourselves. If you have a subject change in these clauses, things get more complicated. And that's when you'd actually have para que plus subjunctive. So what do I mean by a subject change? Well, take a look at this sentence. I turned off the lights so the children could sleep. We have two clauses in there, right? I turned off the lights. Who's the subject? I am, right? Apagué las luces. I turned off the lights. But that second clause has another subject. The children could sleep. Who's the subject? The children. So that's where we have to go to this more complex formula, para que, and that verb in the second part has to be conjugated in the subjunctive. Apagué las luces para que los niños pudieran dormir. And pudieran is in the imperfect subjunctive, which is the past. I know that's a lot of grammatical terms there, and some folks are like, "Wow, that was a lot." I didn't get all that. Think of the subjunctive like this, as a different set of verb conjugations. So if you don't use it, it's going to be obvious because the verb conjugations aren't right. All right? And think that you have to use these verb conjugations when there's certain triggers, certain grammatical constructions, trigger it. If you want to learn all about the subjunctive, I do have a playlist, subjunctive triggers playlist. You can watch that. Have some other videos about it here on YouTube. I also have a private learning site called the Qroo Spanish Crew that if you're really serious about your Spanish, you might want to pop over there. And I have a course, it's my Spanish Master course. It takes folks from the beginner level or around that level. I mean, I'm sure you've been playing with apps, like, oh, el padre, ding, I got a point. Around that level, and shows you a logical way to learn the language, popping patterns together and using tricks like this so you can reach that intermediate level quickly. I also have lessons over there for intermediate students and more advanced. We have live events. People ask me questions directly. It's awesome. I'll put a link to it in the description section of the video. Long story short, lots of resources out there. Really focus on the subjunctive, all right? Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, just do me a favor and give it a thumbs up. And until next time, hasta luego.